Hello, my name is Dr. Eric Hazeltine. I'm a neuroscientist who applies neuroscience to the real world. I've written Long Fuse Big Bang, and I write the blog Long Fuse Big Bang on Psychology Today that describe the mysteries of the brain and how they apply to your everyday life. Today, I'm going to talk about what internet search tells us about ourselves that we didn't know. We can learn a lot of things from internet search because it's the quintessential big data. It reveals small things about us that were previously unknown. There are 3.3 billion people on the internet today, conducting 1.2 trillion searches per year. When you compare this to the average behavioral or neuroscience study, which has a few hundred or a few thousand users, it's clear that we can see things using large data that we could never see by any other means. So, Google search is probably the best way to do this. Recently, I was interested in the phenomena of seasonal affective disorder. What I found was really interesting, that when you do the Google Trends search on seasonal affective disorder, what you see is a very rhythmic pattern peaking in December and troughing in July. This is what you'd expect if people were curious about their disorder, or people who worked with them, their families, or a therapist was also curious about it. But we see something else that's kind of interesting. We notice that other mental disorders, mood disorders, such as depression and bipolar, show the same pattern, as does anxiety. This isn't too surprising since all of these disorders are related to one another. We also notice that with seasonal effects, like depression, we see a strong influence on the amount of sunlight people get during the day. The variation in depression, shown here in Sweden, is quite a bit greater than it is at the equator in Malaysia. Notice that in Australia, you see the same pattern, but it's phase shifted exactly 6 months. There's some other interesting things that are going on. When you aggregate the entire global search for depression, you notice some very interesting phenomena. It's what I call the December dips. Notice here that we peak in November, and then have another peak in March, peak in November, peak in March, dip in July, dip in July, dip in July. What is this notch about? Is it people taking a break from the Christmas holidays? Well, when you go back and look at Australia, you see the same dip, but this time in the middle of the summertime. So it's clearly not related to the Christmas holidays. What is it related to? We don't know, and it needs to be investigated. But here's something else that's interesting. Recently I came across some data from Dr. Ayers at USC, and he said that almost all mental disorders show the same cyclical pattern. Here we see schizophrenia, bulimia, and PTSD. I haven't shown anorexia and quite a number of other disorders, but many of them show the same cyclical pattern. So what's happening? Is exposure to light a factor in most mental disorders? If so, what is the underlying biology? With seasonal affective disorder, we suspect that it has to do with circadian rhythms and serotonin and melatonin metabolism, that it has something to do with the ganglion cells in our retinas that are sensitive to light and send fibers to a structure called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Is this somehow a master control that affects a lot of mental function and disorders? And are these existing mental disorders aggravated by the seasons and triggered, or somehow caused by them? Another question is, who is doing all this bulk search? Is it the patients themselves who are suffering from the disorder, people who care about them, such as their family? Is it their therapists? Or is it some combination of all of them? And then what other alternative explanations could we have? Could these dips and peaks be to do with the holidays? Do we get more curious about people around us and why they're so weird around the holidays? Maybe, but then what about Australia that doesn't show this pattern around the holidays? What about students? Is this psychology students doing searches for term papers? Is the summer dip that we see equal to summer break? Maybe, but then what about Australia? In future speeches, I'm going to talk more about this phenomena I call Searchme. And Searchme has two meanings. It's like, what's going on here, as in, hey, search me. And also search me in the sense that we're digging deep into the psychology of each of us. Look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.